Hello and welcome back to our discussion of Unit 6, Inferences and Conclusions from Data. I'm James Key here on the set of Homework Hotline Live with my colleague Brian Crane, and as we continue, we'll be discussing sampling. Brian, what is sampling good for, and why do statisticians use that technique?
Well, sampling is extremely important because if I want to know some information about a population, a lot of times I'm not going to be able to know what the entire population is or be able to survey the entire population. In some cases I can. For example, we always get statistics about the mean SAT math score of seniors at MCPS. Well, we have all of that data, so we can very easily compute a population mean for any particular year of seniors. However, in a lot of other cases, we certainly can't do that. For example, right now we're in election season, and we might be interested in the percentage of voters that, like a candidate. And well, it's kind of difficult, if not impossible, to actually interview all 155 million voters. And so therefore we have to take some kind of sampling, where a sample is simply a portion of the population that we select in some manner. Also, in some cases, we cannot work with the population. For example, a leading consumer magazine likes to crash cars into walls and things at 20 miles an hour. And if I wanted to find out what's going to be the repair bill, the average repair bill for that, it's going to be kind of difficult to do, because if I crash every car, then I have to repair every car, and it's not particularly cost effective or even effective one way or the other. So, there are a lot of different reasons why we actually have to go to sampling rather than trying to get a population value.
Brian, I heard you mention the fact that this is an election year, and we know that there are a lot of political polls that go on. In theory, it would be possible to find a sample where you're only getting voters that intend to vote Republican or voters that intend to vote Democrat. So what are some of the techniques that statisticians use to ensure that when they gather that sample, that it's reflective of the population as a whole?
Yeah, well, the key point here is to make sure that your sample is representative of your population. Now, how do we do that? There are any number of ways. One of the techniques that we talk about a lot is a simple random sample, and that's simply throwing a bunch of numbers in a hat, drawing them out at random, and making selections. We talk about that in instruction, but of course that's only going to be useful for relatively limited population sizes. I certainly am not going to be able to put 135 million numbers into a hat and draw, let's say, 1,000 or so. I'm not going to be able to do that. There are other techniques. We can look at, for example, certain areas of the country that are representative and take random samples from that, or we can take small samples from various parts of the country. For example, again, proportional, maybe 30 from Maryland, maybe 500 from New York, depending upon the population size of each of those states. So there are any number of ways that we can actually make that representative. Now, one of the problems that we do have, and it's a question that always comes up in statistics, is, well, how many people do we actually need to sample? Do I sample 500,000? Is that enough? Or can I get away with sampling 1,000? Most polls, if you listen to the polling results, is that they'll say that, well, we sampled 485 or we sampled 1,026. Well, people tend to ask, well, gee, how does sampling 485 people represent 2.8 million voters? And that's something that, sampling and the theory of sampling actually deals with.
Thanks, Brian, for that discussion of what sampling is and the things that statisticians do to ensure that the sample they pull is likely to be representative of the sample. In our next segment, we'll be looking at surveys, observational studies, and controlled experiments. We'll see you then.